Hi everyone, good evening. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. So today's session, we are going to discuss our vSphere features. I will give you a quick briefing on virtual machine concepts and also the snapshot, clone, template. These three are our vCenter server features. In our previous session, we covered the complete storage concepts. Now we are concentrating on the additional vCenter server features. So this today's session will cover these three features. Snapshot, clone, template. But before start, we'll have a quick overview on the virtual machine concepts. So here is the today's agenda: virtual machine architecture, same like our network architecture, DV switch architecture and storage architecture. Same way, virtual machine also have one architecture. Normally, this is the icon for our virtual machine, and we'll discuss few virtual machine concepts and vCenter features, snapshot, clone, template. Finally, we'll talk about real-time scenarios. Okay, virtual machine, we know it is a software generated machine and looks like a physical system and runs an operating system and applications. If you see the right side diagram, we can see the virtual machine architectural diagram, and this is the actual icon for the virtual machine. So virtual machine icon. When it comes to the virtual machine architecture, we have the main is virtual hardware. On top of the virtual hardware, we are installing the supported guest operating system. Guest operating system can be either Windows, Linux flavor, Solaris, or any other flavors also. So whatever the operating system is supported by VMware, we can use the specific guest operating system. Even in the VMware website, if you search for a guest operating system supportable matrix, you will find a PDF. It will provide the list of all the supported operating system. This operating system, nothing but a suppose if I log into our lab system, suppose while creating the new virtual machine, click on next. Let's say I'm choosing the default option. Let's say iSCSI data store. And this is a compatible for which ESX versions you want to create the VM. Let's say you want to create the VM for ESX hardware compatibility also. You can choose the respective ESX version. And coming to the guest OS, so virtual machine operating system, we always call it as a guest OS. So guest OS supported families are, it will support for Windows, Linux, and other. Suppose if I select only Windows, you will find all the Windows flavor operating system, right from Windows DOS, the first edition, and it will also support for client operating systems as well as server operating system until the latest. Okay, only this flavors only it supported. And similarly, Linux also, when I select the Linux, see it will support for Amazon Linux, VMware Photon OS, Red Hat, SUSE Linux, and also the Ubuntu. These are all the supported flavors. And same way, if I select the other, you will find Apple Macintosh operating system, some other different flavors, Solaris flavors also it's supported. Even if you want to install the ESX on the VM for testing purpose, it's not for your production use. For testing purpose, you can install, even our lab also, we install ESX on a workstation virtual machine. Okay, so this is the supported option I'm trying to explain here. Okay, so that one I just mentioned as a supported guest OS, either Windows, Linux, Solaris, any other OS platforms, and any data. Even after creation of a guest OS operating system, let's say Windows operating system, you can store your project related data. Okay, and also in the core of the virtual machine purpose is we need to run a applications. Suppose if it is a web server, we need to install the web application on the guest OS, and if it is a database server, need to install the database related application. Even in database there are plenty of database flavors like Microsoft SQL, Oracle database, IBM DB2, MSDB. So many database flavors are there, MariaDB, InfluxDB, so many DBs. And even the applications also, we have millions of applications. Whatever the customer is required, the specific application you can install on a virtual machine guest OS. So and even the virtual hardware, we know the virtual machine have a multiple hardware components. Suppose if I connect to the system, In our virtual machine edit settings, you can see the virtual machine hardware components, virtual CPU, memory, hard disk, CD, DVD. Not only this, even when you click on add, there will be some additional hardware components. This and all is required for a virtual machine. And all these hardware components, we call it as a virtual hardware only. Okay, so the main key components in our virtual hardware is CPU, virtual memory, virtual disk, and virtual NIC card. Okay, let's talk about some description point here. Virtual machine configuration settings are based on the prior choices made about the operating system. It's mainly for the operating system. Based on the operating system only we can choose, because if I'm trying to install a Windows 22 OS, if you want to configure Windows 22 OS with the 10 GB hard disk, it won't support. Minimally, to install the Windows 22 operating system, we require minimally 11 or 12 GB, or recommend is at least if you have a 15 GB hard disk size, it will allow us to install. That is the supported based on the prior choice made about the operating system. Similarly, other operating systems also, every operating system before installing, we need to verify what is the minimum requirement, what is the recommended requirement for a CPU, memory, disk, and NIC, and accordingly we can plan to install the operating system. And installing the guest operating system in our virtual machine is like a, it's the same on like a physical server. How we can install the physical server, mounting the ISO or using the CD DVD, same way we can install on a guest operating system. To install the guest OS, we interact with the virtual machine through VM console. So we know virtual machine console, select the virtual machine, right click, open console. Okay, and using the vSphere client. So vSphere client only we are using to connect to the vCenter server to access ESXi host and virtual machine. And using vSphere client, we can connect to the virtual machine and attach the CD DVD ISO image containing the installation image to virtual CD DVD drive. Okay, and the virtual machines are stored in a directory format. Directory is nothing but a virtual machine folder. Every virtual machine have one folder. If you have three VMs, VM1, VM2, VM3, if you log into the data store and if you see the browse the data store, you can find VM1 one folder, VM2 another folder, VM3 have a another folder. That folder we can also call it as directories. So within that directory, we can have a multiple storage formats. We are familiar with the storage format. You can store the VM in a VMFS data store, NFS data store, virtual SAN data store, and we can also store in a virtual volume data store also. So any data store you can create and store the virtual machine. Okay. And another point we are going to discuss within the architecture, let's talk about some more details on the virtual hardware. So within the virtual hardware, in our ESXi host or host-based virtualization, I just took the very latest version, top 9 I just took here in the table, right side table. The top 9 versions are, it start from virtual hardware version 11, and the very latest version is virtual hardware version 19. So if you create a virtual machine in ESXi 7.0 U2, you will get the virtual hardware version is 19. Suppose if I create the virtual machine in ESXi 7.0 update 1, within update 1 flavor, you will find the hardware version is 18. Okay, and the same way, if the same virtual hardware version 18, if you want to try to run on ESX 7.0, definitely it won't allow us to run on a lower version, because it's already updated hardware version. It's supposed to run either 7.0 U1, or you can use a higher version of ESX, but we cannot go for a backward version. Okay, that is important point. But if you use ESX 7.0 U2, this latest version still support for all the hardware versions. But if you once your hardware version is updated, you cannot run the latest version of hardware on a lower version of ESX flavors. That is a key point here. Okay, suppose if you see the lower version, virtual machine hardware version is 11. This is by default, it comes in a ESXi 7.0. And even if you want to install on a home PCs or testing and development purpose, we use VMware Fusion 7. Series, Workstation 11. Series, and also VMware Player 7. Series. Within these players also, Workstation, Fusion Player also, if you create virtual machine, that virtual machine version, you will find it as a 11 version. For example, in our lab system, if you want to see the virtual machine version, if you select here in our hardware series, here it is not showing version. This information we can find directly from a vCenter server level. Let me log into the other lab system. which is 100. Okay, when I log into this vCenter server, suppose if I select the here, I created here two virtual machines, app VM01 and app VM02. If I select the app VM01, in the summary tab, you can see the current virtual machine is running with Windows Server 2019, and you can see the compatibility is ESXi 7.0 U2 and later version. It's not a previous version. It's a later version only. This hardware is supported, and hardware version is 19. Okay, this is point I'm trying to explain. Virtual machine hardware version is 19. And same way, if I select the app version VM02, you can see the hardware version is 19. Okay, and even our ESXi version 7.0 U2, where it is running on ESXi 02. So if I select ESXi 02, go to the summary tab, you can see our ESXi's latest version 7.0 U3. Here dot 3 means it is nothing but a update 3. And purposefully few hosts I just run with the only update 2. For example, ESX4, it's still running with 7.0.2. That means it's a update 2 only. Okay. So let's back to our slide. So this is about the hardware versions. So currently we are using the latest version 19 in our home lab system. Okay, so I will also show you how we can upgrade the VM version from lower to latest also. Okay, that's just to power off the virtual machine, right click, upgrade virtual hardware. Suppose if you want to upgrade the virtual machine hardware, right click here. There is an option to upgrade the virtual machine hardware version. See, upgrade VM. This upgrade VM is only to help you to update your virtual machine hardware version from 18 to 19, or if it is running with any lower version, from the lower version if you want to upgrade to latest. But the VMware condition is if you want to upgrade your virtual machine hardware version, we have to power off the virtual machine. Okay, and that is the condition. Suppose if you want to quickly test it, just create one new virtual machine. Let's say VM name is test VM, test VM01. Click on next, and it is saying that DRS not enabled. So we have to choose specific ESXi host. I selected ESX3, and you can choose either local data store or you can choose a iSCSI data store. Let's say I'm selecting a local data store. Anyhow, it's a testing only. So local data store. And instead of selecting the compatible version ESX 7.0 U2, for our testing purpose, let's go with a old version. Let's say I'm selecting the version as ESX 7.0. Okay. So 7.0, when we select here, it clearly says that this virtual machine uses hardware version is 17. Okay, so at this point, the whatever the version it is showing 17, even if you match our table 7.0 version is 17. Okay, so we'll quickly create the virtual machine hardware version 17. Click on next, and OS also you can choose any OS. Let's say 2019 I selected. Click on next, and the default is hard disk. Minimally we require a 15 for 2022 or 2019. Let's say I'm selecting 15 GB. Okay, and the disk type we can select as thin provision to save our disk space. Click on next. Now click on finish. So when we click on finish, in our recent task, we can see create virtual machine task is completed. When you select the test VM01 in the right side, you can see the summary tab virtual machine version is 7 and the compatibility is up to 7.0 and later. And later means it will allows you to upgrade this version. Okay, so as I mentioned, if you want to upgrade this virtual machine version, the procedure is just to power off the VM, right click the virtual machine, go to the compatibility, and under compatibility you can choose upgrade VM compatibility option. When you select this option, it will allows you to upgrade the virtual machine hardware version. So here you can choose which version you want to update. Let's say you want to update from 7.u1. Suppose 7.0 u1 means what is the relevant version? If I select 7.0 u1 means it will update until 18. 17 to 18 it will upgrade. If you want to upgrade to the latest, you have to choose 7.0 u2. Okay, so let's say for testing, I'm just selecting 7.1 u1. Now click on OK. When we click on OK, in our recent task, you can see upgrade virtual machine compatibility is completed. So when you select this virtual machine in the right side, you can see now VM version is upgraded from 17 to 18. Okay, this is how we can upgrade the virtual hardware version. For example, again 18 version if you want to upgrade to the very latest. So again same procedure, right click the VM, go to the compatibility and you can choose upgrade VM compatibility. Click on S. When you click on S, you will see the compatibility flavors. Now available version is only one version higher. Okay, select the 7.0 U2. See now this virtual machine uses a hardware version 19. Okay, so click on OK. So within few seconds, it will update to the 19. Okay, so this is how we can upgrade the virtual hardware version, and hope you understand the version information how we can use. And only the key point here is if you have latest version of ESX 7.0 U2, it will still allows you to run all the old version. But if you have a latest version of virtual hardware VM, it will support only with the compatible version only. It won't run on your lower versions. Okay, but during that scenario, still once it is upgraded to latest version, still if you want to downgrade your version, during the downgrade option, the only option is we have to convert the virtual machine to V2V conversion. We call it as V2V. V2V means virtual machine to virtual machine conversion using VMware converter tool. VMware is providing one of the converter tool. Using that converter tool, it will allows you to convert your virtual machine hardware from higher to lower or lower to higher. Any alternate method is possible using V2V. In our later sessions, I will explain you about the VMware converter as well. Okay, so let's talk about the description points now. The description point says the virtual hardware version or VM compatibility level determines the operating system functions that a VM supports. Okay, so whatever the VM supports based on the version also it will list out. Okay, and do not use a later version that is not supported by VMware product. Suppose the 17 is supported until Windows 2019. Within that VM, if you're trying to install 2022, VMware say it's not recommended. So obviously, if it is not supported means definitely even if when you try to install also, it won't allow you to install the latest version of guest operating system. Okay, and the virtual hardware versions 12 and 16 are specific to the workstation and Fusion Pro. Let's say if you see the right side diagram, workstation 12, it's only for the host based products only. It's not, this version is not available in a ESX versions. And even the workstation virtual hardware version 16, if you see the 16 also, it's not available in a ESX flavors. It's available only dedicated for workstation flavor and Fusion flavors only. Workstation and Fusion are like a workstation is supported for Windows operating system. It's a host based virtualization software, and Fusion also it's supported for a Linux based operating systems. Okay, so this is about the virtual hardware version. Now we'll talk about some more additional points on virtual hardware. So within our virtual hardware, a virtual machine uses virtual hardware. We are familiar with the CPU, memory, and also we are familiar with the NIC card and disks. So NIC card and disks and all we are familiar. Let's talk about some additional hardware components. So this the diagram I just captured from the VMware website. So within our virtual machine, the CPUs we can assign maximum up to 256 virtual CPUs. Suppose we can test in our vCenter how many CPUs. Let's say this is power of VM. Right click, go to the edit settings. Within the edit settings, we can try to see the CPUs, how many CPUs we can assign. But this is our lab system. If you want to increase the more CPUs also, our physical ESXi host must should support for a 256 CPU. But in our lab system, it's showing until 4. Why it is showing until 4 means this 4 is maximum limit of our ESXi host. Okay, so let's cancel this one. Select the VM right side where it is running on ESX3. So if it is running on ESX3 means you can just select the ESX3 now. When you select the ESX3, this ESX3 maximum processors are 4 processors. So that is the reason virtual machine also showing maximum increase is until the 4 processors only. But the VMware says that the each virtual machine, virtual hardware can increase up to 256 virtual CPUs. This is as per the VMware configuration maximum guide. Okay, but if you want to increase until 256 virtual CPU, our hardware also must support for a 256 CPU. Then only we can able to increase. That is the condition. Now, even the virtual machine have a virtual keyboard. This virtual keyboard will come when we install a virtual device drivers like the VMware tools. It will automatically it will enhance our keyboard drivers, and similarly for mouse drivers. And the memory we can increase up to 6 TB of RAM. Let's observe the 6 TB is allows or not our lab system. Go to the virtual machine edit settings. When you select the memory, just select the drop down menu. You can see the options here. Minimum memory is 512 MB and maximum memory you can see is 24560 GB. It's not the MB. It's almost equivalent to 24 terabytes of memory. So, but it is showing as 6 TB of RAM. Maybe the I captured the from the maybe little older screenshot. As per this latest version of virtual machine, it's clearly showing that each virtual machine we can increase the maximum memories 24560 GB. So 24560 means let's open the calculator. 24560 divided by 1024. So that means it's equivalent to 24 terabyte of RAM. Okay, I just given one example. The memory is always have there is a max limit. So latest max limits we can find from a configuration maximum guide. Okay, and even there is an option for 3D graphics. Virtual machine also supported for a 3D graphics. This 3D graphics also you can find in a virtual machine edit settings only. Within our edit settings, let's say memory I'm just assigning as 2 GB. Okay, now the graphic options also you can find here. There is a option for video card. So video card is nothing but a 3D graphics card. That means in our earlier versions of virtual machine, it's not supported for a 3D graphic edition, but latest version of all the ESX host and virtual machines are supported for a graphics also. Even the any gaming applications or medical related applications and all, you can still run those applications or on a directly on virtual machine level because we have a 3D graphic facilities available. And the NIC card, it is showing us up to 10 virtual NIC card. Let's observe directly on our latest version of VM. Let's say NIC card. If I want to try to increase the NIC card also, here the count is not showing. Normally, if you want to add additional NIC card, how we can add? Just select the virtual machine, add new device. You will have all these devices we can add. Okay, this devices it shows as hard disk you can add any existing hard disk also you can add RDM disk you can add USB NVDM. These all the components only I just mentioned in this diagram. Okay, so NIC card you can also add IDE controller devices. It's a old model of hard disk. IDE means integrated drive electronics, but nowadays no one is using IDE controller. All are using a SCSI adapter cards only. Okay, and up to 3 parallel ports, serial ports. These and all normally used for a printer and scanner devices. Okay, even if you want to run a old model of printer, serial printer or parallel port printers, you can still connect to our virtual machine, and even the scanning devices also you can connect directly to virtual machine. And up to 4 AHCI SATA controller. Even this is also for a controller called hard disk technology only. AHCI means advanced host configuration interface. This is one of the SATA controller driver names. Okay, even the SATA model it will support or IDE controller or latest version is SCSI. Even NVMe means SSD hard disk also it supports. Okay, and not only hard disk latest versions, even the old version of floppy drives it's supported, and even a USB drive here it is showing us 20 devices max we can connect to our virtual machine. This counts and all I just captured from VMware website only, but the latest information always refer to the VMware configuration maximum guide, because configuration maximum guide you will find the exact accurate size maximum device information. Okay, for example, if we see this diagram is showing 6 TB, but when we see directly on our virtual machine, we can assign max memory until the 24 TB of RAM. But if you want to assign 24 TB memory to virtual machine, our physical hardware also should have a that much of high memory. Okay. So this is about the virtual hardware. Now let me elaborate the main components within our virtual hardware. So one of the main components in our virtual hardware is vCPU and vMemory. So vCPU means we choose the virtual machine vCPU and vMemory according to the applications and guest OS requirement. Even in our earlier classes, while we installing the vCenter server installation. During the vCenter server installation, we observe there are multiple options. You can like t-shirt sizes. We can use tiny vCenter server, small vCenter server, medium vCenter, large, X large. While choosing this all the flavors, each flavor CPU memory configuration is changed. So the same point they mentioned here. Always vCPU and vMemory according to the application and guest OS requirement. Suppose if you are trying to install a database server, obviously, database server require a minimally 2 CPUs or 4 CPUs, and memory also minimally we require a 4 GB of memory. For test VMs, even we can create with 1 CPU, 1 GB memory. But for the production servers, always remember that based on the vendor specification document, vendor specification, whatever they recommended to the database, let's say Microsoft SQL latest version 2017 or 2019. When you're trying to install the SQL 2019, verify the vendor documentation. In that documentation, if they say the recommendation minimum 16 GB RAM, the recommend as per recommendation only, we can create the VM with 16 GB RAM and also the 4 CPU or 6 CPU, whatever the recommendation given by the vendor. Okay. And not only SQL, any application. So always go through the vendor documentation. As per the hardware specs, we need to assign the vCPU and vMemory. And once we create the virtual machine, even in the future, if we want to add or change the any CPU information or memory information, we have a facility. So we can add, change or configure CPU memory resources to improve VM performance. So this option is available in our virtual hardware. And the maximum number of virtual CPU that can be assigned to a VM depends on the following factors. So the what is the factors are the number of logical CPUs on ESX host. So just now we discussed based on the ESX host maximum CPUs only we can assign a guest OS virtual machine CPUs also. And the type of installed guest OS also, whatever the types VMware is default given, that's based on that guest OS only we can create. The default OSs are Windows, Linux, Solaris, and we can use some other flavor OSs also, like SUSE Linux and any of the Ubuntu flavors also we can install. And a virtual machine running on an ESXi 7.x, X means here update 1, update 2, update 3. Host can have up to 256 virtual CPU, and this is also as per the configuration maximum, and the maximum memory size also it depends on the VM compatibility setting, and 6 TB now with the latest version it is supported until 24 terabyte. Okay, so this is about the virtual CPU and virtual memory. Now we'll talk about another important virtual hardware component, which is virtual storage. So while creation of virtual machine, we see the always the virtual device drivers, like whatever the storage protocol or drivers is, we keep seeing these names. So this is the one bus logic parallel, LSA logic parallel. These and all based on the hard disk device model driver protocol names. So bus logic, LSA logic and all old versions, the latest versions all are a SAS models only. Okay, SAS and para virtual normally it will choose for a Linux flavored, and SATA also one of the hard disk technology. For that one we'll choose AHCA SATA controller. But normally when we creating a virtual machine, we no need to worry about the device driver selection. By default it will pick automatically. Even when we creating VM in a workstation also, we are not selecting specifically. It will choose based on when we select the VM name and the specific guest OS family. Based on the OS family, it will choose automatically. Okay, and the virtual disks are connected to virtual storage adapters. Storage adapters provide connectivity for our ESXi host specific storage unit or network. And ESXi host support different classes of adapters, including SCSI. We know software SCSI adapter and also the iSCSI software adapter. RAID also we have a RAID adapter cards, and fiber channel, FCOE, fiber channel over Ethernet, and also Ethernet cards. And ESXi access the adapters directly through the device driver. that driver names only, these all the driver names, or sometimes we call it as a these all the protocol name also. And the bus logic is the old version, normally we'll use for a old model of hard disk. And after the bus logic, the latest version is LSI logic, and after LSI logic parallel, latest version is SAS. And VMware para virtual SCSI, normally this para virtual SCSI recommended for a Linux based operating systems. And SATA also, SATA based hard drives, it will pick the AHCA SATA controller driver. And virtual NMV. NVMe means it's a non-volatile memory. This is also for latest flash drives, it will choose automatically virtual NVMe driver model. Okay. Now we'll talk about a one of the concept of virtual disk. Virtual disk, as we know, we have a two types of disk, thin disk and thick disk. So let's observe the thick disk concept. So virtual machine about thick disk, thick provisioned virtual disk. So thick provisioned disk only difference is thin disk means normally whenever we provision the size, we'll try to understand from this diagram. Let's talk about the diagram first. If you see in this data store, we have a data store total size is 60 GB and 20 GB. And that means we have total size is 80 GB only. But within the 80 GB, how we assign the sizes? The first data store, the VM1 is formatted with a thick format and the disk size is 20 GB. And suppose the second VM, it's formatted with a thin disk format and the disk size we assigned as a 20 GB, and even the third virtual machine also we assigned as a 40 GB. That means almost all the disk size is assigned. But here as per the diagram, they assigned only 40 GB, but it consumes only 20 GB. That means the remaining disk is free. And even the third virtual machine also, the overall assigned size is 80 GB. Within the 80 GB, it's occupied only 40 GB, the remaining is free. That means if the remaining space is free means in our data store, it will consume only the actual consumer size. But thick disk always it's a 1:1 ratio. Like whatever you assign, the complete ratio is occupied. So 20 GB is occupied here. But for the thin disk format, we assigned actually 80 plus 40. 80 plus 40 means we assigned the size is 120 GB of size. Within the 120 GB, it won't consume the 120 GB size on our data store. It will consume only actual usage size. So actual usage within the 40 GB is 20 GB. And here also within the 80 GB, actual usage is 40 GB. So 40 plus 20, 60 GB usage only consumed from our data store. So if you see in this diagram, if I configured our data store with the thin means, we have always the data store have a some additional free space we can use from your data store. Suppose if I format my disk with a thick means, whatever the size you assign, they're completely occupied in our data store. Okay, but most of the real-time scenarios also they will go for a thin disk format only always. But for if your application is very mission critical application, during that scenario vendor also, the specific application vendor may recommend go with a thick format. Until unless most of the all the test VMs, development VM and production VMs always will go with a thin disk format. Okay, now try to understand the description. Thick provisioning uses all defined disk space at the creation of a virtual disk. Okay, so it uses all the defined disk, whatever the size we assign, assigned size 20, see the complete 20 is occupied. So uses all the defined disk space at the creation of virtual disk. And VM disk consume all the capacity as designed at creation regardless of amount of data in guest OS file system. Even if the guest OS file system, whatever it is, either it is NTFS file system or Linux ext3 or ext4 file system, but it will consume completely if it is in a thick provisioned format. And within the thick provision, we have a thick provision disk types of eager zero and lazy zero. There are two types of thick provision format. This format information will find during the virtual machine disk creation time. Let's say, for example, if I want to add a new hard disk, or if you want to observe on a existing VM, which is it which format? Let's go to the hard disk, select the hard disk one. When you select the hard disk, you will find hard disk policy, storage policy, as well as you will see the hard disk type. Currently, this hard disk is provisioned as a thin provision format. If you want to modify, we can, there is no option to modify now. But if you want to modify still, if you want to change your disk format from thin to thick format, we have an option only through the command line. Command line, while using the VMK FS tools command, will help you to change the disk format from thin to thick and thick to thin, vice versa. Okay. Suppose if you want to see the both the disk format option, we'll try to add a new hard disk and we'll see the options. Let's select the add new device, select the hard disk. When we select the hard disk, expand the new hard disk, you can see the option here, disk provisioning. Under disk provisioning, you can see three options. So thin provision, we have only one format. Within the thick provision, there is a two options. Thick provisioned, eager zeroed, lazy zeroed. The word easy to understand. One is lazy zeroed, another one is eager zeroed. That means eager zeroed means whenever whatever the disk you consumed, like 40 GB disk, all is filled with zeros. And lazy zeros means it will be the name itself, it's a lazy. So when you are trying to write the data, that time it will occupied with a zeros. Okay, so zeros means don't confuse, it's our system language is zeros and ones only. So it's completely thick provision, eager zeroed or lazy zeroed. Let's understand the difference between eager and lazy zeroed. In an eager zeroed thick provision disk, every block is pre-filled with a zero. In lazy zeroed thick provision disk, every block means whatever the data you copied, the every block means our hard disk, every hard disk data store have a block size. Default VMFS and NFS block size is 1 MB. 1 MB means even if you copy a 0.5 MB file also, by default it will consume the size as per the minimum block size. This block size where we can find is log into our vCenter server and select the ESXi host, go to the data store tab. When you select any data store, let's say this ESX data store type is VMFS 6 version, and even iSCSI data store also VMFS 6 version. For example, let's minimize here and we can try to observe the data store property details. When I select the data store properties, go to the configuration tab, you can see the default data store block size also here. When I see summary tab, data store summary, we'll try to observe the detail here. Here it is showing VMFS 6 host, one host connected, one virtual machine is running, and the block size information. Let me look for a block size options. Overview or configuration. Storage IO controller. Let me see the iSCSI data store. Go to the data store tab, iSCSI. Configure. If you are not seeing here means yeah, when we select the storage adapters, I'm just looking for block size information here. Sometimes block size information we can see directly from the ESXi host also. Here we can see path selection policy, or else let me log into the host, direct host 71. When I select the data store here, yeah, here you can see. Maybe in the vCenter, I didn't recall the exact option, but if you see in the direct ESXi host, when I select the data store, you will see our VMFS version is 6.8.2 and the local data store and the block size. The default block size is 1 MB. So that what is the meaning of 1 MB block size means even if you try to copy a 1 KB file or 0.5 KB file also, but our data store consumes the minimum is 1 MB only. Suppose if I copy a file of 20.5 MB file. 20.5 MB file means it will consume the size is 21 MB because our default minimum block size is 1 MB. Okay, that is the point it's saying. Every block is pre-filled with a zero, and even if in a lazy zero thick provisioned disk, every block, our default block size is 1 MB, and every 1 MB block size is filled with a zero when data is written to the block. Okay, that is a point I'm trying to explain here. This is about the thick provisioned virtual disk. Now let's try to understand the thin provisioned disk. So in thin provision disk, here the diagram is again, I'm using the same diagram. I will try to understand the thin provision difference. A thin provision disk uses only as much data store space as the disk initially needs. Let's say I given the disk size is 40 GB, but initial needs is only 20 GB. Okay. If the thin disk needs more space later, it can expand to the maximum capacity allocated to it. How much we allocated here is 40 GB. So the maximum 20 GB, it will increase up to 40 GB only. Suppose if I observe the third virtual machine, the actual allocation is 80 GB, but initial need is only 40 GB. Later it will expand automatically until the 80 GB only. Okay. Suppose in future, I don't want this remaining 40 GB, you want to reclaim. So to reclaim also there is no graphical option. The only we can do from the command line method. So run the unmap command using a command line method. So you can reclaim the unused space from the array. Array is nothing but a our storage array. Okay, and reporting and alerts help manage allocations and capacity. So always VMware recommend to configure some reporting means all your data stores you will generate one report, and also configure alert purpose is if your data store is consumed over 80%, you will get a warning message. If your data store is consumes over 90%, you will get a critical alert. So when you have a alert in a system, the best thing of alerting is we no need to bother about the data store size and capacity. Whenever it is occupies over 80%, you will immediately get the alert. When you see the alert message, you can try to troubleshoot your data store. The initial troubleshooting is you can clean up any unused VMs and unused virtual machine ISO files and any of the templates, old templates and all. You can clean up from the data store. Like that, we can uh, resolve the alert. If there is no option to clean up in our data store, the final solution will be we have to increase our data store from existing size to newer size. Let's say my data store size is 1 TB. If your data store is completely full, the only solution is you can increase your data store size from 1 TB to 2 TB, whatever the space available in our storage array level. Okay. So this reporting alerting also option is available in our data stores level, and we can maintain the combination of thick and thin formats within our vCenter server. There is no limitation to maintain only thin, only thick. We can use a combination of disk formats. Anything you can maintain in our data store. Within the same data store, you can create few virtual machines with thick, few virtual machines with thin format. Okay, it's up to application requirement. And for example, more efficient use of storage. So let's try to understand this example. Provisioned space for virtual disks. So virtual disk actual provisioned space is 140 GB. 140 means if you calculate this value, see 80 plus 40, 120, 120 plus 20, 140 GB is actually provisioned for virtual disks. But available data store capacity is 100 GB only. If I see my data store capacity, it's only the 100 GB. But within the 100 GB, I assigned more than 100 GB of capacity due to the thin disk format. If you are using a thick disk format, we cannot provision more than 100 GB. If you have a thin disk, this is the benefit of copying a additional. We can go for a over provision. Okay, and used data store capacity is only 80 GB. Clear? So from this example, we can easy to understand the difference between thin disk and thick disk. Clear? If you have any question, let me know. Okay. So until now, we discussed about the CPU, memory, disk. Now we'll talk about the virtual hardware. Another component is network. So virtual machine about virtual network. So within our virtual network, within our virtual network, we can see a virtual network enables communication between virtual machines and physical machines. When we configure a networking for a virtual machine, we select or change the following items. So we can always change the network adapter type, port to group connection, and network connection state. And we can also choose whether whether to connect to network when the virtual machine is power on. So these four options are available in our virtual machine. Let's quickly observe these four options. Log into our lab system. Let's say our vCenter server, select our test VM, go to the edit settings. Within the edit settings, if I expand the virtual machine network, you can see the option. See the current status is connect at power on. Connect at power on means when we power on the virtual machine, this option is ticked means it will automatically network will be in the connected state. Okay. And adapter type, we have a option to modify the adapter, but currently it's already added adapter. It is showing as E1000E. E1000E means it's a E1000 enhanced version. Okay. If you want to observe the additional adapter types, you can just click on add new device and choose the look for a network adapter. The last option is network adapter. So when I select the network adapter, see there is a another network adapter is added, new network. Just expand the new network. You can see the options. Status, same like above adapter, connected power on, and adapter type. So adapter type should be, you can choose either E1000E or SRIOV pass through. Normally SRIOV pass through we used for a hyper converged environments. But when we have a hyper converged environment like virtual SAN scenarios, we'll use pass through option, or else the latest version of network adapter type is VMX Net 3. But if you want to use VMX Net 3, VMware condition is our virtual machine VMware tools should be up to date installed. So if you have VMware tools installed in our virtual machine, we can start using the VMX Net 3 adapter type. Okay, and every virtual machine NIC card also have a unique MAC address. We no need to provide the MAC address. See, MAC address will create automatically. Okay, and we also have a facility to set the manual MAC address also, but most of the time we'll go with the automatic. But manual MAC address is required in case some of the applications they will bind the license with MAC address. So during that scenario only we can go for a manual method, or else most of the time we'll choose the MAC address selection is a automatic MAC addressing only. Okay, and when we see the slide, the point one is network adapter type. We understand there are three types of network adapter. One is we have E1000E and pass through adapter, and we can also choose VMX Net 3. Most of the time recommended adapter type is VMX Net 3. And port group to connect to. If you want to choose the port group also, how we can choose the port group is we can choose port group from the first tab, new network. Under the VM network, if you click on browse, you will see the available network connections. Let's say one is VM network connection. VM network, if you see this icon, this is a standard switch VM network. If you see the above icon, it's a distributed port group. Even though it is running under the distributed switch, but this vSwitch one, it is showing blank means it's a default vSwitch adapter. Okay, so like this we can choose our virtual machine network adapter. Not only network adapter type, even the connection type also we can choose. So that point I explained here, port group connection. So port group connection can be either virtual switch connection or distributed virtual switch connection. And the network connection state, the connection state can be like this. Either you can just connected state, or you can uncheck and uncheck. Uncheck means it's a not connected state. If you tick means it's a connected state. And this tab option also, what it is saying is when this option is checked, when the VM is connected at power on, VM is powered on, this network is automatically connected. The same point I mentioned in the fourth point. Whether to connect to the network when the VM is powered on, that option also we have. Okay, so this is about the virtual network. Now let me try to elaborate the adapter types in the next slide. So if you see here, Virtual machine about virtual network adapters. We have a multiple network adapters, but in our latest version, we just now noticed only the three adapter. But if some of the customers still using a ESX 6.5, ESX 6.7, if your customer is using a old version of ESX, you may also see the some old version of network adapter types. Okay, let's talk about these adapter types. When we configure a virtual machine, we can add a network adapter NICs. It's not limited to one NIC. We can add a multiple NICs. Okay, but as per configuration guide, it's like around 10 NIC cards also we can add for each virtual machines. Okay, but most of the real-time scenario, we may recommend to add minimally two NIC cards redundancy purpose. So why we need a two NIC card means if any virtual NIC card is not accessible or if there is any driver issue, immediately it will connect from the second NIC card. So in the production environment, the minimum recommendation is they will go with a two NIC cards or more than two NIC cards. Okay, and some scenarios we may also use a NIC cards like two NIC cards for a production access and another two NIC cards for a backup access. That means users when they are accessing the virtual machine, they will access through the production NICs, and the backup team when they initiate the backup from the virtual machine without disturbing the production NIC card, it will take the backup through backup NIC card. That means totally for virtual machine, we need to add a four NIC cards, two NIC card for production redundancy purpose and another two NIC cards for a backup purpose. So all the virtual machine backup will take through the backup NIC card only. Okay. So that options are available in our virtual network adapters. And whenever possible, always recommend to choose the latest version VMX Net 3, and the network adapter type E1000 is the old version. The latest version of E1000 is E1000E. E means enhanced. Okay, and emulated version is nothing but a matched version of an Intel Gigabit Ethernet NIC card. This version is almost equivalent to the physical Intel Gigabit Ethernet NIC card, and with driver available in newer guest operating system. Even the drivers also by default it comes with a latest version of guest voices. And VMX Net 3 available only with VMware Tools. When you install VMware Tools, this VMX Net 3 adapter is we can easy to mount. And flexible also one of the old version. Flexible is equivalent to VMX Net, and the latest version is VMX Net 3. So if we are using a VMX Net, that means one series that is called it as a flexible. So can function as either a VLANs or VMX Net adapter. And pass through adapter SRIOV pass through. This is normally will used for a converged network adapter scenario. Like if you are using a virtual SAN or hyper converged storage, during that time we may recommend to go with a pass through adapter. Okay, that pass through adapter allows virtual machine and physical adapter to exchange data without using VM kernel as an intermediary. That means VM kernel means ESXi VM kernel. So without that ESX communication, we can pass through the access from virtual machine to physical using this adapter only. That means it's a virtual storage concept. And vSphere direct path IO. This is also similar to pass-through adapter. Allow VM access to physical PCA network connection platform with an IO memory management unit. Okay, but most of these scenarios will go with VMX Net 3, and the other adapters only there will be a special use case always. And PVR DMA, this is nothing but a para virtual remote direct memory access adapter. This is also one of the old version of adapter. You may see this adapter in a workstation or VMware Fusion. Okay, normally when we are creating a Linux virtual machine, you will find a para virtual adapter type. Okay, so para virtualized device that provides improved virtual device performance, and it provides a remote direct memory access like interface for what vSphere guess. And example supported version for this adapter is Linux kernel 4.6 and also later versions. Okay, this is about the network adapters. Now we're going to talk about the some additional virtual hardware devices. So the additional virtual hardware devices as discussed, here are the some additional devices like CD, DVD, USB, floppy drives, SCSI devices, and graphic processor units. Okay, so these all options are you can find from a our vCenter server while trying to add a new device. In that new device wizard, you will find all these options. When I click new device, so you will find all these options. Network adapter, other devices, you will find a PCI device. PCI means peripheral component interconnect device, and watchdog timer, precision clock, serial port generally for printers and scanners, and the controllers also you will find some controllers. It depends on your hard disk model. You can choose the relevant controllers. Okay, even the for virtual machine you can also allows to access your thumb drive, pen drive also you can access USB, and it will support for a latest version USB 3 series. And within the disk drivers also there will be a multiple disk options also available. Okay, all these points I explained here. Now we'll talk about the virtual machine VMware tools. So when we create a virtual machine, the one of the recommended option from VMware is VMware Tools. So VMware Tools is a set of features that enhance the performance of your virtual machine guest operating system. The benefits and features of VMware Tools include it will provide a all device drivers. These device drivers include SVGA display. SVGA display means it's nothing but a graphic display, and also the network adapter type, and it will also provide some memory management technique. That memory management technique name is balloon driver, and it will also sync the driver for quasi IO. IO means input and output, and increased graphic performance, improved mouse performance, guest OS heartbeat service. This will help you normally for a guest OS monitoring purpose, and time synchronization. This time synchronization is one of the important option, and ability to shut down the VM. If you have a virtual machine running with VMware tools, you can able to shut down the virtual machine. For example, I will show you this shutdown option. Let's say here virtual machine is power on state. When you see the right side summary tab, our app 01 summary tab, you can see virtual machine version, guest OS version, compatibility and hardware version, and VMware tool status here. Currently it is saying that VMware tools are not running and not installed. So if you want to install the VMware tools on this virtual machine, how we can install? Just right click the VM, go to the guest OS, you can choose the option to install VMware tools. When we select the install VMware tools, you can see the VMware tools installation. It's also clearly says VMware tool include drivers to improve graphics, mouse, networking, and all. The same point I mentioned in our slide. Okay, now just click on mount. When we click on mount, VMware tools CD will be mount automatically. Just log into the virtual machine console. I try to open the virtual machine console in a new tab. Click on send control alt delete, and let's log into the virtual machine. When we log into the virtual machine, you can see VMware tools are mounted in this virtual machine. Okay, when you open any folder, go to the this PC, you can see VMware tools CD is mounted. Okay, to install, just double click here. It will launch the setup.exe, or you can just click on setup.64, setup64.exe file. When you click on setup file, it will launch the installation. Even if you see the screen is only for a display is only, it is showing the medium size. It's not enhanced the display. After we install the VMware tools, you can see virtual machine display will be enhanced. Even the mouse performance also slow. Just minimize this visual. Installation is started. So VMware tool installation in a guest operating system. So we have three options: typical, complete, and custom. Always go with a typical option. Install. So once the VMware tools are installed, it will require a restart. If you see here, it's showing all the drivers installation is going on. See, VMX Net 3 driver also installing, and other SCSI drivers, mouse driver. Okay, network also updated. Click on S. Now video driver is installing. See the graphics also going to update now. Okay, now completed the VMware tool setup. So click finish button to exit the setup wizard. When you click finish, it will prompt you to restart the virtual machine. Because when you restart the virtual machine, the VMware tools to take effect. So just click on yes. So restart may take a while. In the meantime, so this point I am trying to explain, last point, ability to shut down the VM. So for example, if I see the another login to vCenter server, let's observe on a app virtual machine 2. This app virtual machine 2, VMware tools are not installed. When the VMware tools are not installed state, when I right click the virtual machine, if you want to try to shut down your VM, just right click here, see the guest OS, shutdown, restart guest OS. These two options are grayed out. Okay, this is the point I am explaining in the slide. If the VM is not running with VMware tools or not installed state, we are unable to shut down a guest operating system from the VM console level. Okay, when I right click the VM power, see these two options are grayed out. Okay, now the same two options will observe from a app virtual machine 01. If I select app virtual machine 01, if you see here VMware tools are running state and this is the current version. And even if you click on more information, you will see VMware tools installed and the version is current. Current means it's a latest version and the current VMware tools version is 11.3.5. Okay, this is a tools version. It's not the hardware version. It's a VMware tools version. Okay, when you have VMware tools are in a running state, you can able to shut down the virtual machine from VM console. So right click the virtual machine, go to the power. When you select the power, see shut down guest OS, restart guest OS. These two options are highlighted now. Okay, so that is the key point. The purpose of enabling these two options is VMware tools is running. So instead of log into VM and restart from here or shut down from here from the guest OS, you can also do perform the same operation when the VM is running with VMware tools. You can just do it from a virtual machine console itself. Right click the VM, you can either shut down or you can do restart guest operating system. Okay, but these two options are not available if the VMC is running without VMware tools. These options are not available in the virtual machine level. Okay, these two options are grayed out. So that is the point. And even the time synchronization. Time synchronization also you can see here when you go to the edit settings, virtual machine edit settings. There is an option for VM options. When you click on VM options, you can look for a time management, either time management or you can look for a VMware tool settings. When I see the VMware tool settings, there is an option under VMware tools, synchronize time with the host. Okay, we no need to do anything. By default, it is synchronize the time automatically with our ESXi host. When I click the information option, this information option also they say it's automatically synchronized with the time with the ESXi host. The synchronized time is periodically. Okay, the same point highlighted here. Time synchronization will enable automatically when we have a VMware tools in our guest operating system. Okay, and now let's talk about the virtual machine home lab. Few quick lab concepts. Whatever we discussed until now, the same one. Identify the files that make up a virtual machine. So we already know what is the files it will create in a virtual machine. We quickly observe. Let's say virtual machine test VM01. Just now we created this virtual machine. If you want to see this virtual machine file, go to the data store and click on the data store. And within the data store, go to the files. You will see our virtual machine folder name test VM01. When we select the test VM01, you will see the virtual machine files are VMX file, VMSD. VMSD means snapshot database file. This file size is 0 KB. and VMDK means virtual machine disk file, and this disk file also 0 because the currently this VM not installed with any operating system. That's why it is showing the size is 0 KB. And HLog, this is also virtual machine log file, but there is no additional files. This additional files will create only when we power on the virtual machine. So let's observe that one also. Right click the virtual machine, go to the power on. When we power on, just now we observe virtual machine is running with only 4 files. When we power on, there will be some additional files, NVRAM, some additional files will be created now. If you see the recent task, virtual machine power on test VM01 is completed. Okay, now again go to the data store. Under the files, select the test VM01. See, there will be some additional virtual machine files are created. These files will create only when virtual machine is powered on. So what is additional files is created? It's created a swap file. Even this swap file size always equivalent to virtual machine memory size. What is our virtual machine memory size? Let's go to VM summary tab. And if you see here, virtual machine memory size is 4 GB. If your virtual machine size is memory size 4 GB means the equivalent swap file also it will create. So virtual swap file size also equivalent to the 4 GB. It's in the, it is showing in a KB. This, if you calculate this KB to GB, it is equivalent to the 4 GB. And the log file we already have earlier. NVRAM file also additionally it created, and virtual machine is locked. So .lck means it's a lock. This is a locking technology. Whenever we power on the virtual machine, this virtual machine is locked under the ESXi host. So currently this is running under ESX3. So this VM locked here. Okay, until we release this host is this VM is running here only. Okay, if you want to move this VM from one host to another host means you can just right click the VM and we can choose the migrate option to migrate to another host. Okay, so next class we'll talk about the virtual machine migration concept. During that time I will explain about all these 4 migration mechanism. Okay, now let's back to our data store folder. Within the data store folder, we observe the additional files. Along with VMX, VMDK, we noticed NVRAM is created, swap file created, log file created, and there is some temporary configuration file and VMware.log file. Okay, there are some additional temporary files also created. Okay, the same point I explained here. Identify the files that make up a virtual machine. Okay, and compare virtual hardware versions. Even just now we observe the hardware versions. We know where we can see the all the virtual machine hardware version. Let's say here we have 3 virtual machine. If you want to see all 3 virtual machine hardware version at a time, just select your data center, go to the virtual machines tab. Under this tab, you can see all options at a time. Here, just choose here. Even if you want to add a additional options, there is a option to add. If you are not seeing the additional option, let me select the cluster. There is a filter option. How about in the host level? Only these options only available. Okay. The only other method to verify the hardware version is select the VM, go to the summary tab. You can see the hardware version here, VM hardware version 19. Even our other VMs also running with the latest version. Okay, that is the second point. Compare VM hardware version and recognize the components of a virtual machine. What is the components of VM? In our first slide, we verified the virtual machine components. What is our main components is virtual hardware devices. Just now we observe all the hardware devices, and another virtual machine components are we have a guest operating system. So guest operating system we can see from the console, and also the data and applications. Just now we install the VMware tools. VMware tools also one of the application only. Okay, data means you can just log into the VM and create any of the data. Let's say, let's log into the app VM01. If you create any files and folders on the drive, that is the our data. But in the production scenario, we'll store all our production server related data. Okay, so hope that point also clear. And another point in our virtual machine concepts is Navigate the vSphere client and examine the VM settings. So until now we observe the virtual machine edit settings, how we can add the device and all. We already examined this option. And identify the methods for accessing virtual machine console. So virtual machine console, how many types we can access. We have two options. Either you can launch the web console here. If I launch web console, it will open in a new tab. This is one option for test VM. Another method is launch remote console. If you want to launch this mechanism, just click on the information icon. It says we need to download the remote console tool. So this tool will download from VMware website. You can just download and install. When you install this tool, just launch remote console. It will open a separate widget like this. Okay. But in our our lab system, we already installed. See, this is also another method. So we have two methods of consoles. Either use launch web console method or launch remote console for your virtual machine. And another third method is you can enable the remote desktop connection or SSH session for Linux systems. When you enable the remote desktop session from the OS level, you can also connect the system using MSTSC. MSTSC means Microsoft Terminal Service Connection. Okay, and that is the fifth point. And sixth point, identify virtual machine network adapters, including enhanced VMX Net 3. So this one we already observed network adapter types, and differentiate between type of virtual disk. Even this option also we observed. So virtual machine disk types, we have a three disk types: thin disk, thick disk, lazy zeroed, thick disk, eager zeroed. Okay, these are the options are available for a disk types. Okay, now the next point is we are going to start with a snapshot, clone, and template. So shall we take a quick break or can I continue? If you're okay, we can take the 10 to 15 minutes break and then we'll continue for the snapshot, clone, and template.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so now it's 9:53. So another 15 minutes we can start. Okay, once you are back, just text me. We'll start. Thank you.